welcome to AARC's weekly Fireside Chat today. I'd like to first make sure that everybody has understanding of how the technology works. On your computer screens, if you look at the very bottom, there's a ribbon. If you'd like to ask questions, there's a chat box that you can go into and put questions, and there's a Q&A box where you can type in questions. So please take a moment to take a look at the bottom of your computer. Move your cursor down to the bottom. You'll be able to see the ribbon and those options for you. So my name is Sam Lewis. I'm the Executive Director of the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, AARC. I'd like to start first by just giving you an update since our last Fireside Chat from last Friday. AARC continues to move forward virtually. We've moved all of our programming, weekly programming, our therapy, our day-to-day programming, and our monthly programming virtually to all of our membership, which is over 1,500 members that are currently in our community that are formerly incarcerated. We are also currently assisting all of our members who may have lost their jobs to applying for unemployment and other areas that they may need help. So we're actively involved both in the community and with our membership. I'd like to also give you an update from CDCR. On our Facebook page, outward facing, and our Instagram, we normally post daily reports from the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. As of April 9th, and there will be another report coming out later this evening, 483 tests have been conducted in the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. Of those 483 tests, 34 positive tests have been found of people that are currently in custody. 18 of those are in the California Institution for Men, 12 of those are in Lancaster State Prison, 1 is in the California Institution for Women, and 1 is in the California Substance Abuse Treatment Facility. There have been 0 deaths in the state of California. 71 correctional staff members have tested positive. Nationwide, just to look at this nationwide too, there are 1,324 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in our jails and prisons, and 32 deaths, sadly. So that's our report. This past week, Monday, the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation began releasing 3,500 people from in custody. AARC is actively involved with other community-based organizations across the state, offering free transportation from the institution that they were incarcerated in to their home space. With that said now, I'd like to introduce our 2 guests this week, 2 amazing people who I both have immense respect and admiration for. First, Marc Mauer. Marc Mauer is one of the country's leading experts in the sentencing policy, race, and criminal justice system. He has directed programs on criminal justice policy reforms for 40 years and is the author of some of the most widely cited reports and publications in the field. Race to Incarceration, Mr. Mauer's groundbreaking book on how sentencing policy led to the explosive expansion of U.S. prison population, was a semifinalist in the Robert F. Kennedy Book Award in 1999. He is the co-author of The Meaning of Life, The Case for Abolishing Life Sentences Across the Nation. Since joining the Sentencing Project in 1987, he has testified before Congress and state legislatures frequently, and he frequently appears on radio and television networks and is regularly interviewed by the New York Times, Washington Post, National Public Radio, and many other major media outlets. In 2005, he became the executive director of the Sentencing Project. Marc, welcome to the show. How are you dealing with this current or these uncertain times? Just a minute, my apologies, Erika. Our second guest is Erika Quinn. Erika is an oral surgeon technician who is happily married to her husband, Anthony, who is currently incarcerated in Lancaster State Prison for a 19-year life sentence, 19 years to life, of which he has served 24 years. He was only 19 years old when he started his prison term and is now 45 years old. Erika is proudly awaiting and supporting him, although it's not easy through the circumstances we're facing today in these times. Our broadcasted this specifically on extreme sentences during COVID-19 and how does that look in our society. Marc, how are you doing in these uncertain times right now?
Well, I'm doing okay. And first of all, thanks so much for having me here and all the great work that you do at AARC. I'm stressed out like the rest of America, like the rest of the world. At the same time, our work continues as you've done here, where our office has moved to doing everything remotely, and it's not the same as being together every day, but I think we're coping pretty well. What strikes me is in many ways how fortunate I am. I've got a place to live, I have a steady job that's not threatened, and we just think about so many millions of our countrymen and people around the world who have so much less, and how this crisis is hitting them even harder. So we're thankful for what we have, but we're also very concerned about the future. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, let alone a year from now.
Thank you, Marc. Erika Quinn. And as I understand it, we actually have a special guest who I'll let you announce. But first, Erika, how are you doing during these uncertain times?
Well, all I can do for now is smile through the pain and stay strong for Anthony, and for our loved ones who are, waiting for a positive message to let them go home through these hard times. And I actually like to introduce my husband, who is on the phone with us, straight from Lancaster State Prison. So I'll go ahead and let him speak.
Hey, Tony, can you hear me?
How are you, Sam? Marc?
Good morning. How are you? Or good afternoon.
I'm doing well. We're hanging in there. Let me first introduce myself. My name is Anthony Quinn. I'm from Santa Monica, California, and I've been incarcerated for 25 years on a 19-year life sentence, second-degree murder, for what the judge called a fight that turned to tragic death, or what I refer to as the worst decision of my life. And I have a tentative date to appear before the parole board in August of next year. Tentative meaning that it could be sooner or it could be later than April of 2021. But we all know in prison, tentative means it's definitely going to be later than that 2021 date. There are so many uncertainties, like I was telling you, Sam, of dealing with us with these boards. First, it's one of those uncertain things that will the board see my 25 years that I've served in prison be enough, a sufficient amount of time? And I'm clearly not the 20-year-old impulsive, angry, alcoholic criminal that I was. I am now a 45-year-old, thoughtful, compassionate, hardworking, loving man who is truly, truly remorseful for taking the life of Patrick that is away from me. And who has addressed my defects in character, my work, way of thinking, by taking the many self-help classes that I have taken. And the list goes on. The list is personal development, victim sensitivity, AA, CGA, criminal engagement, anonymous, healing dialogue and action, which provides healing, as well as we were healed as well in that class, awesome class. And I've also watched several laboratories from correctional officers and sergeants, and the list goes on. But I have to say, my greatest achievement has to be, and the most rewarding, is being a part of the Pause for Life Canine Enrichment program right here in Lancaster State Prison, where we're training these dogs to be awesome canine citizens out in society. What is so amazing that we're essentially giving these dogs a second chance, and it's something that we also hope to receive as well. After we demonstrate true rehabilitation, we should be worthy of a second chance in life. That's something I'm actually asking for. I'd say on and on about Pause for Life will be the basic work that we're doing here. But despite all that I have done and that I'm doing in prison, there's still that uncertainty dealing with the board. And we all know that the recidivism rate of a person that does a substantial amount of time is super, super low. And I'll go as far as to say that in the Pause for Life program, we've had several men that have been paroled. And we have 100% success rate. Every single one has gone on and done amazing things in society. And I'll go as far as to say, even if lifers that have done a substantial amount of time. These are examples of what can be produced when given a second chance at life.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
Tony, can you
Go ahead.
Can you share with us what are the conditions like inside right now? Like, what are the conditions like that you're experiencing that you see around you?
Okay, the conditions right now. Okay, we're getting cleaning supplies. The porters are cleaning this place every single day. We're getting the supplies necessary to do so. And I'll share a story with you. Just the other day, there was a person that was showing signs of the COVID-19. So a doctor and two nurses came in, and the doctor was in full hazmat suit. He went to the inmate's door, and what I believe he did was swab the inmate's mouth. And after he did so, one of the nurses held open a bag, and he put the item in the bag. She then sealed it, put it to the side, and then he stepped away from the door. The other nurse put a quarantine sign on the inmate's door, and they backed away. And then the doctor proceeded to disrobe. He took off all his hazmat suit in a methodical, organized fashion. And I have to say, we're quick to condemn and point fingers that they're not doing this, but I have to say they were doing everything possibly can to, like, if this person was infected, they weren't going to affect the next person. You know what I mean? They put him in the bag, and he went ahead and he geared up again, and he went to go see the other inmate. And he did this process until he finished every single inmate that he had to see that day. He came back 2 days later, and he took the signs off the door. It was just a scare that these guys were showing signs of the virus, but it wasn't the virus. So that was a scare in itself. But we're really going through a scary, scary time. And I'll be doing a disservice to the people out there. You know what I mean? We're putting on a brave face that is not scary, but it's extremely scary. We can't drive ourselves to the hospital. We can't dial 911. And it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when this COVID-19 hits the prison. It's going to be bad. It's going to be bad. We're accessible for this virus to wreak havoc unnecessarily. It's showing no mercy. And I have to say, I take great comfort. We take great comfort in knowing that Ralph Diaz is doing all he can because we see him on an institutional channel. And he says that we're going to get you guys the supplies that you guys need. We're going to try our best to keep you guys, safe. We believe the governor when he says this as well. But the thing is, we're at a time where is it going to be enough is what we're scared of. It's our fear. And I have to say it's a scary, scary feeling, not knowing if it's going to be enough.
So, Tony, are they issuing masks? And so I have a three-part question. Are they issuing masks? What is day room and yard like? And are you able to go to canteen? A canteen, which is the prison stores.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
Okay, once again, I can only speak for what's happening in this building and on this yard. I know other places are having different things going on, but what I can say is one building at a time. We went from 5 buildings being on the yard to 1 building. And the only building that we come in contact with are the people that you can come in contact with are the people in your building. You go to yard and you're able to go to canteen. You go to medical comes to you more so than you go to them like you used to. And when they do come, they come with the hazmat and things of that nature. We are getting cleaning supplies. They are selling hand sanitizer in the canteen. It's called personal care, alcohol free, only with hand sanitizer. And it says kills 99% of the germs. It kills 99.9% of the germs. So alcohol free. What other questions do you have, Bill?
Are they passing out masks?
Masks are being given to the workers, the canteen workers, the laundry workers, and the people that are preparing the food that work in the kitchen. They're getting masks. You can ask for a mask. You go to canteen. I'm not using canteen, but if you go to medical, they'll give you a mask, but you're not readily handing them out to every inmate. They're definitely not doing that. The correctional officers are wearing masks on top of protectors. They are doing that. That's a change.
Okay, and then so like the feelings, like the guys that you do talk to, that because I know most of the guys, this is one of the yards that I visit often with others, and so what is the general feeling of the guys inside on your yard? Have you all talked about this?
Hey, Sam, I mean, we're putting on brave faces, but I'll be lying to say that it's not a scary time, man. It's a real scary time, and everyone has that sense, just that unknown. Yeah, they're doing all that they can, but it's that, is it going to be enough when the virus comes? No, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when it gets to prison. How bad is this virus going to be? What kind of habits what kind of devastation is it going to leave in its wake? That's what I'm asking. It's a scary, scary time.
So,
I think it's different. I'll be lying to you.
so as our topic today is extreme sentences, I'd like to segue over to Marc, who's done a great deal of both research and I consider him, from my reading, one of the first people to ever really do the type of research considering what created mass incarceration. In these times, Marc, like massive society-wide destabilization can result in large unexpected macro change. Is there a possibility that this could be an inflection point for a big change in how America looks at extreme sentences, like the 19 years to life sentence that Tony has, that he's done now 24 years on?
Yeah. I hope there is room for something like that to happen. We're already seeing that. I think many Americans are waking up to some realities that too many people chose to ignore. We know that the skies are more clear, more blue now because people aren't driving their cars so much, and that should wake us up more to climate change. We see the race and class inequalities and who's contracting the virus and who's dying. Those numbers are very shocking, profound, but they shouldn't be surprising to anyone who's looked at the healthcare delivery system we've had and what those race and class dynamics are too. So I think we want to be hopeful about thinking the same with incarceration. Now there's a focus, at least it's a modest focus. Hopefully we can open that up in saying, do this many people, 2 million people, need to be behind bars in our prisons and jails? We're seeing at some levels, why are so many people in local jails on pretrial status? Because they don't have enough money to post their bail when wealthier people can buy their way out. We're looking at short sentences in local jails. What is 2 months in a jail going to accomplish? And we also need to look at long sentences, extreme sentences in prison. How much time is enough even for a serious crime? All of us, I think, on this call understand just how excessive our sentencing systems and structures have become. And the only good thing you might say about this crisis we're in is, if it gives us an opportunity to speak to more Americans, to tell the human stories of people like Tony and so many other thousands who are long past the point where they should be coming home, and how can we make that happen?
So, Marc, you advocate for a cap on sentences of 20 years. Why is that? Why is extreme sentencing ineffective? Can you explain that to the public that many instances don't really understand? Like, why shouldn't we give somebody 300 years to life?
Sure. Well, when we talk about a 20-year maximum sentence, some people think that's pretty provocative, pretty radical. If we were in Western Europe right now, that wouldn't seem at all provocative, because in most countries in Western Europe, similar with Canada and some other nations, very few people get more than 20 years in prison. Either by law there are limits, or in practice. It's just very unusual. Here in the United States, you can go into any courthouse any day of the week and see somebody getting 20 years in prison for a drug offense where nobody's personally harmed by it. So our punishment is much more extreme than other nations. And I would argue it's counterproductive. If the idea is supposed to be public safety, one thing we've known about incarceration and crime for many years is that people age out of crime. I think we can all understand it. We think back to our teenage years. All of us have done things that we look back on it, we're now embarrassed about, we're ashamed about, we shouldn't have done it. We realize now that we're young, we made mistakes, and this cuts across lines of race and class. So we know that people are sentenced to prison for decades or life, often in their early mid-20s, but we also know that crime rates, which rise in the late teen years, early 20s, start to fall pretty sharply by the time someone's in their late 20s, 30s, certainly 40s, 50s, and 60s. People grow up in prison just as they grow up on the outside, too. So when we get a 45-year-old who's already done 20 years for an armed robbery, he did a 25, that person today, in most cases, is far less of a threat to public safety than that 25-year-old was on the day that he was sentenced. So we're keeping people in prison much longer. It contributes substantially mass incarceration. The fiscal cost is enormous, and yet we're preventing very little crime by keeping people locked up for decades. And we can prove this because we see that when lifers get out or long-termers get out after 20, 30 years in prison, their recidivism rates are virtually lower than any other group. And again, people have grown up, they recognize they're different people now, and that's who they're trying to be when they come back to the community.
And directly on that point, so first, for the public that might not be aware, starting in Governor Brown's tenure, and a little bit before, actually under Governor Schwarzenegger, now close to 6,000 life prisoners have been released in the state of California. And of that 6,000, there's less than a 1% recidivism rate.
Mm-hmm.
Less than a 1% recidivism rate. Marc, could you tell us nationally, what is the average recidivism rate?
Well, if you look at how many people are rearrested, say within 3 years of leaving prison or reconvicted, about half the people coming out of prison for all offenses are convicted of something within 3 years of release. So that's sort of the benchmark for what we're looking at. So, as you document, that's pretty dramatic difference there.
So think in terms of, and this is to our audience, think in terms of this. Half the people that are released from prison go back in 3 years. Less than 1% of people that have served lengthy sentences like Tony go back. Less than 1%. So when we're looking at this in the age of COVID-19 and people being released or selected for who should be released, public safety would dictate just on math, and math, in my opinion, doesn't lie. Our best bet is to look at people like Tony. And Tony, are you back on the line with us?
Go ahead and say that again, my love.
I'm here.
So how old were you when you were convicted of your crime, or when your crime was committed?
I was 19 years old, and when I came to prison when I was 20 years old.
And how old are you now?
And I'm 45 years old.
So exactly to what you just said, Marc. So definitely the 45-year-old Tony is not the 19-year-old Tony. Tony, when do you go back to the board, or when do you go to the board, Tony?
Well, I have a tentative date of April 2021, meaning that it can be moved up or it can be pushed back. And we know in prison that it can be pushed back before pushing forward. That's just how the design works. Yeah, so I have a date of 2021, April, but who knows? Who knows, especially with the COVID-19, and then, yeah.
So Marc, some of the conversation around early release tracks along the narrative of nonviolent or low-level offensive, but how do we situate the urgent need to keep people who are serving long sentences safe during COVID-19? So how does that sit? So the people,
Well, clearly, the long-termers, by definition, in many cases, are in those high-risk categories. They may be elderly, they may be infirm, they may not have had any medical issues treated well while they're incarcerated. So if we think about the public health risk, that's the first place we want to be looking at. Now, people say, well, public safety is the other issue that we care about, and that's perfectly fine. So the question is, who can be released with minimal risk to public safety and who might present a real threat to public safety somehow? Now, far too many people define that solely by the crime a person was committed of. Now, the problem is, we need to distinguish a violent crime from a violent person. Just because you're convicted of a certain crime doesn't mean that defines who you are for the rest of your life. Again, we all go through life transitions. We've all done things, most young men certainly, that could be considered violent, hopefully not too serious for many, but they were. And we like to think that we've gone beyond that now. So we need to look at who the person is today, not who was that person who was sentenced in court 20 or 30 years ago. That's the question we want to be looking at, and it's both a public health issue and a public safety issue, and all of that, I think, suggests we need to take a much broader look at who's in prison and who could be safely released back home.
Absolutely, absolutely. Tony, you said you wanted to mention?
And Sam and Mark, if I may, can I speak on that as well?
Yes, please do.
I know there's a push to release a lot of inmates back into society that are fit for society. And I know Governor Newsom went to court and he filed a petition, things of that nature, and he got shot down. But I want to make it clear to the people out there, we've got to make it clear that we're not asking for the prison gates to be open. We just ask that the process be sped up. As of right now, you have people that have gone to the board, they have been found suitable, went to the board, been found suitable, and they're still tacked on 150-day wait for them to be sent home. Why are they given another additional 150-day wait after being found suitable?
So what Tony's explaining to you is the process of the board. So here's the process in California, the Board of Parole hearings. So you go to the Board of Parole hearings, which is made up primarily of former law enforcement, and they look at your case, they look at your behavior in prison, they look at everything about your life, and they make a determination if you're suitable to be released. Once the board makes a determination, let's say they say you're good to go home, you still have to wait 150 days before you're released. And so one of the things that we're asking is, can that process be sped up? Can a person be released maybe on an ankle monitor and say your review process is continuing, but because this board, which I believe does a thorough job, has said that you're not a threat to public safety, so we're going to release you immediately pending your review. And that would free up some people to be able to be released. I'd like to segue into, Erika, for you, what is it like having a loved one in prison with so much time inside?
It's extremely difficult. I can't express the pain right now that I feel as a wife to have my husband, who I consider completely rehabilitated. He has less than 18 months to go to parole, and he has done 24 years in prison. I feel that he is ready to come home. I'm scared. I'm terrified. He's kept me very positive through all this. He really doesn't inform me of the honest truth because I kind of panicked at one point in time, and I appreciate that. But right now I'm so scared. I try to just put a happy face every day of my life when I go to work in front of family members. This is extremely difficult. I think that things should change. If a man is completely rehabilitated and he has gotten the help classes and the certifications to come home, and he has a parole plan in place, I think we should speed up the process for all these men. I think this is the opportunity for them to come home. Let them come home. They're ready. They are changed men. They have served, a lot of years in prison. They have done their time. I think it's time to change the laws. If men are ready to come home and they are changed, positive men who are going to be a positive impact to the community, I think they need to come home. I'm dealing it as best as I can. Having your support, Sam, having ARC, having Pause for Life in our life, having Marc join us today is an extremely amount of support for me as a wife and also for my husband. So, yeah.
Thank you, Erika. So I'd like to, just for a minute, could we bring up that visual of John Gorberman and Tony that we had a little while ago? And the reason why I want to bring that visual up, it's a picture of John and Tony, is because John was sentenced to 400 years to life. And here it is right here. So this is John Gorberman, who's now free. He was part of Pause for Life, for instance. And now John literally travels all over the state of California, rescuing dogs to have them trained to be dogs that save people, dogs that help with PTSD from veterans, that help with different things. So John's sentence was commuted, and John is giving back to our community immensely. And that's just one example. If his sentence was not commuted, John would still be in prison. If we want to give more examples, and we can, I served 24 years on a life sentence. If I was not given the opportunity to be released, I would still be languishing in prison and not being able to give back by mentoring and working at a great organization such as AARC. So when we look at people that have served these extremely long sentences, I look at John, myself, and so many others. If you go to the ARC website, you'll see many other former life prisoners that are doing great work in the community and giving back. Tony I'm a reflection of Tony. Tony is me, and I am literally Tony. John is Tony. So when we're looking at those things, we're looking at a bigger picture, because the other piece that I like to speak to is the impact that extreme sentences have on what we call the silent victims. And the silent victims in this are children. And we will definitely have a segment on that coming up, but it's specific to children, because children who don't have their parents at home, that are in prison for these long sentences, there's trauma underlying that, and it's something that we could do something about. Like, that's an important part to look at. Marc, do you see jurisdictions, in particular geographical areas, moving towards a more radical concept of who could be released?
Well, I'm sorry to say, I don't think there's too much radical in terms of releasing people now. There's some states where the numbers are pretty significant. New York Governor Cuomo has pledged to let out more than 1,000 people. These are mostly people in on a parole violation or have relatively few months left to serve. The Kentucky governor is doing some similar things. 700 or so people will be coming out who have less than 6 months to serve. The bigger context in some ways that around the country, there are movements in many states, certainly in California, to try to get legislators, other policymakers to focus on these long-term sentences. So many states now have campaigns for what gets called second look sentencing. And again, it gets at this idea that on the day you're sentenced for a crime, nobody knows what you're going to be like in 10 or 20 years. So under a second look sentencing bill, after you've served so many years in prison, you could petition to go back to court and have the judge take another look at your sentence. In Congress now, Senator Cory Booker is the lead sponsor on a second look bill. Under his legislation, anyone in federal prison who'd served 10 years on a long-term sentence could petition to have a rehearing. There's no exclusion by crime there. It's just if you've done 10 years and you can make your case. So we're seeing this start to take place around the country. We don't see the same kind of pressure in the current crisis in terms of making more people eligible for release because of these excessive sentences.
Okay, thank you, Marc. Erika,
Yes, sir.
can you tell us about what needs to be done to help get Tony home? What can we do actively to support to help in getting Tony and others like Tony home?
Well, we need to come together to be able to address that Tony and other men in his situation are changed men. They have done their time. They are ready. They have served their sentence. And when is it enough? How long is enough? When can we draw a line to say, you know what, he is ready today, tomorrow to come home? I think our voices is extremely important to make everyone aware that these men are serving sentences that they already have worked so hard to forgive themselves and to show to the community that they are changed men. They are no longer the person that they were when these crimes were committed. For instance, my husband, this was a simple street fight, and he got 19 to life for a street fight. Unfortunately, we're very sad of what happened, but he has, served 24 years, going on 25 years. He is a changed man. I wouldn't have married him. I would have never thought I would have married a man in prison. And I married him for his structure, for the good man that he is. He is loving, respectful, and he brings light to my life, more so than a man that, out here in the streets could bring a woman like myself. And I'm proud to say that. He is an extremely good, changed man, and I think he deserves a chance to come just as long as other men that are in prison in the same predicament as him.
So I'd like to share something.
Just like me.
Absolutely.
I'd like to
It's men like me, all around here, men that have served this time, that are truly remorseful for the crimes in which they committed. I think with unbearable shame and unbearable guilt for getting so I could the way from.
I'd like to share something with the audience. So this morning, I received an email from John Gorberman, who is a director for Pause for Life, who, as I said earlier, was sentenced to 400 years to life. And John sent me an email from the men that are part of the Pause for Life program, and they want to know how could they donate to AARC to help the effort of providing transportation of people that are coming home, under the 3,500 people that are coming home. It literally brought tears to my eyes because they're in more dire circumstances than the people that are being released, but they want to help other people. That speaks, that compassion and that thoughtfulness of the next person speaks volumes to the type of people we're talking about that are inside, that in my opinion are not being given the opportunity that should be in these circumstances.
And Sam, I wouldn't expect anything less from John or the guys in Pause for Life in their building, which they're in A5. I see people asking, this is the kind of heart these changed men have. And for them to ask if they can do this speaks volumes of the type of men that they are now. They are changed men to go out of their way to ask if they can help another person, in the time of them getting home. I want to touch really quick. I want to mention that Tony is working with Loyola, and we pray that they will be able to assist us in getting Tony home as soon as possible. I pray all the time as a wife that we want to speed up the parole board hearing, but I just stay in hope and hope that works out. And I mean, I've done as much as I can as a wife. I can push paperwork. I can do, anything I can. I probably send the governor 100 emails a day asking him for, help in anything that he can and commuting my husband or, and I've also reached out to him in other cases. But I'm just, staying really positive and hopeful that these laws will change and help me get these men home, especially my husband.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great. Real quick. Sam, can you hear me?
Yeah. Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, we're definitely trying to donate money to this any organization that we possibly can. That's what we're doing here. Also, like we're thinking of others besides ourselves. Like John said, whatever we can do to help other people in crisis situations is what we do from our heart. So if you get us the information as soon as possible, really, really.
Hey, thank you, brother. And for our public alert, like that's the caliber of people we're talking about. Though they're in what I consider to be the most difficult circumstances, they still want to reach out and help others. Marc, what's next for you in the sentencing project? What are you working on, and how can we, ARC and the audience, support?
Well, as we talk about lifers and long-termers, at the Sentencing Project, we've started a campaign to end life imprisonment. You can check it out on the website at endlifeimprisonment.org. And this is both a public education and an advocacy campaign. So we want to first of all, get the facts out about life imprisonment, why it's counterproductive, why people change, and we need to recognize that change. Look at the fiscal cost, the human cost, all of that, and then work with coalitions at the state and the national level who are trying to finally challenge life imprisonment. It seems like a far-off goal for many, but so did ending the death penalty seem like a far-off goal. And now for the last decade, almost every year, another state has gone ahead to abolish the death penalty. So now we're down to just 28 states that still maintain a death penalty. And I think we can see some similar change in life imprisonment over the years. Some of it's going to be incremental, some of these second look sentencing review policies that I mentioned before. We've seen through the Supreme Court, even in juvenile life without parole, 3 historic decisions that have dramatically cut back the ability to sentence young people to life without parole. So change is possible. We're at a moment now of momentum for criminal justice reform. So what we're trying to do is to push that conversation further than it has been going to date and say we need to take a very broad look. If we truly want to end mass incarceration, we can't do it without looking at life imprisonment also.
Thank you, Marc. I know, Tony, you have to get off the phone in a minute. Is there any last word you want to share with us?
Go ahead, my love. Sam is asking you if you have any.
Sam, I appreciate the opportunity to speak on your program. Marc Mauer, thanks for all the work that you do for us incarcerated. We truly, truly appreciate it.
Yes.
We just got to make it clear that the process needs to change, and hope that we can just come together and change the process. I appreciate ARC and all they can do, man.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
We believe we can get through anything with ARC by our side, and the Pause for Life and different organizations that are pushing for our cause, and we appreciate you so very much. I just want to say a few goodbyes to my wife. I appreciate everything you've done for me, staying in my corner. My parents, I am so sorry for all the shame and heartache that I brought into your life. I love you beyond words. I'm sorry for all pain that I caused. ARC, thank you, man.
Thank you, Tony. We're with you, brother. Know that you have a lot of people out here supporting you and supporting other brothers and sisters that are in systems, and we're not going to stop pushing to help you all. Continue to stay positive, be kind to each other, and look after each other inside, okay?
Yeah, I appreciate it. Marc Mauer, appreciate your time as well.
Sure.
Thank you, my love.
Stay strong.
All right.
Thank you.
Stay for everything, Sam.
Thank you. So in regards to what ARC is doing, so in the past we've done quite a bit of sentence reform, including passing multiple or co-sponsoring multiple pieces of legislation for youthful offender parole, or what was called youthful offender parole. We helped pass the statewide initiative for Prop 57 that incentivized rehabilitative programming. That is actually being attacked. If you think in terms of a person going to prison, shouldn't we want that person to receive all of the rehabilitative programs necessary for them to come home, be healed, and be able to contribute to society? Shouldn't we want to give them those tools necessary so that they never go back to jail or prison? So there's a lot more that we plan on doing, specifically to dealing with extreme sentences and LWOP. We're not going to stop. We've now co-sponsored and helped pass 17 bills, which we will continue to push forward on. Marc, could you tell us a little bit about the book, The Meaning of Life?
Sure. The Meaning of Life, I wrote it with my colleague Ashley Nellis at the Sentencing Project. And, it came about, I've been working on life imprisonment. I first started doing this really 40 years ago at Jackson Prison in Michigan, where I first met large number of lifers, and it's been something we've worked at for a good number of years. Sensing project, we every 4 years or so we've done a national survey. Most recently, we find that 1 of every 7 people in prison is serving a life sentence. 1 of every 7. That's 200,000 people nationally. And so we've done a lot of research and we've done a lot of advocacy, and it seemed like it was time to bring that together in a book that could try to communicate both the research, what do we know about lifers, who they are, how they change, and what can we do about changing that. So the book was published a little over a year ago. I was very pleased after it was published and was getting a nice reception. We got a foundation grant that enabled us to send 2,000 copies of the book to prisons around the country. And so we distributed them through some higher education programs in prisons, some lifer groups, some prison libraries, a whole range of different programs working with long-termers. And we asked people to write to us after they read the book to give us their ideas on what should we do about life imprisonment, what's the experience of life imprisonment. We've received hundreds of letters back from men and women inside, and it's both painful reading it, but it's also uplifting. Painful because people talk to us in very clear terms about what decades in prison means to them and the challenges of maintaining a positive outlook, even in very difficult circumstances. But the uplifting part is the strength, the power of the ideas and the emotions that people have, and their ability to think through these issues and what it means. So, I'm encouraged that we can continue to see progress in this area, working, as you know, with organizations like AARC and many others around the country. Life imprisonment is something, it's long past time to get it on our national reform agenda.
Thank you, Marc. Last thing I want to ask of you, Erika, for our audience. Like, I know, and I can speak to it from my experience, but from your experience, what is it like, the phone calls and having to get off the phone with somebody who you love so much?
It's painful. It hurts. I try to always, the last 60 minutes, always tell him jokingly, I'm not hanging up. I'm going to hang on here until the call ends. But it's very, very hard. I can sit here and explain how I feel, but we can only imagine what they feel. They are behind the call. He's done this for 24 years, so I can only imagine the pain that he feels every time he has to make this call to call me and be strong for me and our family and for everyone. For me, I just stay strong. I love hearing his voice. I would love it if he can call me every 15 minutes, but unfortunately we have to share phone time with the other gentleman in his building, which I want to say really quick. Building 5 in Lancaster is doing an awesome job as far as structuring the phone list that they have going to make sure that all the men get their calls. So we play fair, and we are thankful to everyone who participates in all and being fair with us, because these calls are very hard to talk to him. And right now, I haven't seen him in 1 month now, and it's very difficult, Sam. It hurts a lot, and I just have to stay strong, you know.
Thank you, Erika. I want to share a comment that was sent to me. And I heard when Tony asked, so the comment says, and this is speaking of Tony, he asked for forgiveness for the pain he has caused, and we need to ask that same as members of our society that have perpetuated these laws and practices. What comes to mind is joy and light Tony is spreading, far, far surpassing the pain he has caused.
Absolutely.
And so if you heard him, he asked his mom and his dad for forgiveness for causing them pain. And I know what it felt like when I was inside. Excuse me. So when I say that I am Tony, I literally mean that. And for people like Tony to have to continue in this time, right now, when we could look at people like Tony, I'm no different from Tony. I'm literally had the opportunity to come home 8 years ago, and I give back every day. When are we going to start looking at people like Tony and so many others that have served these extremely long sentences and say, based on the science and the math, they're no longer a threat? They're not. Over close to 6,000 lifers have been released, and we go back to that number, less than a 1% recidivism rate. Tony is that part of that population. So when we look at this on a larger scale, please consider the math and science matches that people that have served these extremely long sentences should be considered, especially in this day and age. I'd like to give each one of our guests an opportunity to close out. Erika, please, any last statements you'd like to share with our audience?
Absolutely. I want to thank you, Sam, so much for giving me and Anthony this opportunity. ARC, Marc, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for all the hard work you do for our incarcerated loved ones. I want to make it really clear. Anthony has an inmate number. Anthony is an inmate to everyone, to society. He is an incarcerated loved one, to a terminology we all use, but he's my husband. He is an uncle to his niece who, when she goes and visits him, does not want to let him go. She's, repeatedly tells him, when are you coming home? Let's go home. His mom and dad have been his support for 24 years. They have not left his side. Anthony is an inmate to the state of California, but he is my husband, and I beg and I plead that please let him come home so he can enjoy his life and his freedom. And ultimately, I want to thank Pause for Life, Alex, John, everyone, the volunteers. We love you dearly, the dogs. I don't think we would be in this position without them, honestly. Pause for Life is doing tremendous amount of work. It has brought Tony a feeling of humanity. He is human again, dealing with dogs in his cell, being able to be normal and treated kindly with love. And I just want to, change the laws. Let's bring these men home who have served their sentences. Let's speed up the process. If they have parole board hearings in the near future and their parole plans are set, let's bring them home. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really am.
Thank you, Erika. Marc?
Very well.
Sure. Well, this has been really just wonderful to be with you and all of you who are listening to this. And, it always strikes me, I do this work because I care about human rights. I care about social justice. I don't have a direct loved one in prison, but I have many people I consider good friends in prison all around the country. And that's why I do this work. I hope people watching understand, too, that I'm in a privileged position. Sam, Erika, you work every bit as hard and probably a lot harder than I do, but you have painful stories that you're willing to share with the public. I don't have to talk about the most painful parts of my life to do this work, and that takes a lot of courage, and I hope people appreciate what you're doing because it's really remarkable.
Thank you so much, Marc. Thank you.
Thank you both for joining me on this fireside chat. I'd like to just recap some of what Tony said because there's also, so for this particular institution, this particular yard, we do know that they're practicing social distancing, they're practicing wiping down walls. The medical staff are quick to monitor anyone that may have signs of COVID-19. They're making sure that they have hand sanitizer. And I'm hoping that this is true across the state. This is not what I'm saying. This is literally what came from Tony. And just want to make sure that we are aware that we believe that in this instance that the Department of Corrections and the Secretary are doing exactly what needs to be done and trying to make it as safe as possible. What we're asking for is for a closer look at the people that have served these extremely long sentences and the opportunity for them to come home. For someone in the chat box asked, how can we help? If you look, we've also put up the Sentencing Project's website, Pause for Life's website, AARC's website. There are different ways you can support. Please go on our websites and look to see how you can support. The best thing you can also do is please educate yourself. Read the books that have been published by the Sentencing Project that describe what our country and our states are going through as far as these extreme sentences. The other thing is to stay in contact, stay in touch. Every Friday at 12 noon, we'll be doing these fireside chats. We will have different guests each week. So next week will be a different guest or host of guests. And for me, my closing statement, I just like to say again, I'm Tony. I'm no different from Tony, the thousands of people that are serving these extreme sentences. And I had the opportunity to come home and give back. And I've watched thousands of others come home and give back in ways that surprise even me sometimes. This is not something that we see on our mainstream media that needs to be seen more often. I'm not unique. I just had the opportunity, and I know thousands of other former life prisoners that were once incarcerated for violent crimes that give back from the heart every single day of their lives. Again, remember the numbers that we talked about twice already. In the state of California, close to 6,000 lifers have been released from prison with a less than 1% recidivism rate. Our national average for recidivism is 50%. Which one would you say would make our society or our community safer when we're taking into consideration of who we're going to release? Again, thank you, Marc. Thank you, Erika. And thank you, guests, for tuning in. I look forward to speaking to you next week. Peace. Blessings.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye, Marc. Thank you.
Okay, take care.
Bye. Take care.
Talk to you later, Marc. Thank you.